So, hello, everybody out there. This is a little special edition of Song News Network Presents with me and Paula DeAngelis from Australia. I'm not from, I'm in Portland, Oregon. She's in Australia. And we're here with Emma's Revolution, who consists of Pat Humphries and Sandy Opatow, who are together are two of Paula and I don't know what the grammatical way to phrase it, but two of our favorite musicians.
Yes.
Yeah,
Sweet of you.
I always get stuck with those prepositional phrases.
Grammar. And contributors. They're contributors to the Song News Network collection.
They are indeed
There we go.
contributors to the collection,
Yes.
and so this is going out, by the way, on the Facebook page of Popular Resistance, as well as on YouTube, Twitter, and various other platforms. And it gets turned into a podcast later if you look for This Week with David Rovics on any podcasting platform. So there's your little little directional non-commercial notification. Yeah. So
It'll also be on the Song News Network YouTube channel.
good.
And
Excellent.
probably
And
Facebook
I
as well.
just pressed the button, which is what I was doing, so that it'll be on our Facebook page now.
Oh,
as
look at
we're-
that.
Yeah, so
Oh,
There you
fancy.
go. So we're
Fancy.
everywhere.
Yeah,
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
can click
Good.
share if you're looking on some platform. You know, I always forget to mention that to people. I always figure they can do that.
Oh,
but-
yes.
Yeah,
Share
so
share us widely.
the beginning of any interview is always where I get stuck because there's way too many questions, especially right now. Like, oh my God, they just discovered a vaccine, and then Biden apparently is the new president, and it's like, I don't know what. And then we've been living through a pandemic, but one thing I don't know. You guys are doing such an amazing job at doing music and workshops and networking during the pandemic online. Definitely, I'd say in Paula and my worlds, it's we're continually impressed at the output and at how you're doing all this networking. And it seems like it's not it. I just I don't know. See, didn't even formulate a question on that subject, but I wonder if you can talk about how it's been to be. You guys tour. You've been touring for many years. I've known you many years, and you guys tour pretty much as I do, I think. And suddenly the whole world came crashing down, and all our tours got canceled.
Yeah.
And then it seems like you guys were just up and running right away with the whole sort of new Zoom reality, playing at Unitarian churches around the country every Sunday on Zoom, and all kinds of cool stuff. And I just wonder if you could start by talking about that wild transition, among the many wild transitions that I think we've all had to make as working performers over the past 20 years in this constantly changing world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we had that same panic that you had, within the course of about a week and a half, all of our gigs canceled. And I just thought we put it out on Facebook and just said, hey, we found ourselves with no work whatsoever. So anything that you could do to support us, we want to work. We'd love to be working through this time, and we're going to figure out how to do that. And then Sandy just like jumped right on the technology end of it.
Well, I think that I want to sort of say a couple things around that. I got very lucky. So it might have been from that kind of Facebook post, but a friend of ours on Facebook said, hey, you should check out this group called Windborn, who are maybe they're in their 30s or something like that. And we were talking a little bit backstage that generationally
i.e. younger than we are by a fair bit.
There's a technological advantage generationally that those of us who might not have been of that generation have to connect with people who are. So really our friend Lee said, you should check out Windborn. They just did this great concert online. And I literally called Jeremy up from Windborn, or I texted him and Facebook messaged him. So, and he was just super willing to help us figure out how to do those very early Facebook Live events. And I think that when even just bringing in that whole sort of discussion of what has been crazy about this time, it sort of draws into why we do what we do and why we wanted to find a way to continue to do what we do. Because as activist musicians like you, David, like our world is about creating community wherever we were through song and through these concerts and stuff like that. And so I kind of had to rely on that. And the way Pat was saying, posting something. And we just got help from like somebody like Jeremy who wanted to explain it. And we were very lucky that we had a Patreon page set up in January. And it took us a number of years of people saying to us, you should really, yes, you're kicking your ass.
Get a Patreon.
Traveling around. And
That's a funny, that you just set up your Patreon account last January, just before the pandemic hit.
In January.
Yeah.
And
We
I
just
mean, it took
finally
me
got around
years.
to it.
It like took me years to like do all the, get around the whatever, the logistical and brain sort of obstacles I had to get around and then come up with, it's like everything we do as artists, we have to come up with the whole package, like the story, the song, the images, the whatever. So we had just done that in January and a few people responded. And then when the country got it and the whole world got it about what this meant for musicians and for artists of all kinds, then people were just on board right away. And we can tell you that having, essentially having like a basic monthly income, like Andrew Yang talked about, changes one's life. I mean, we spent 19 years traveling.
Universal basic income.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We spent 19 years touring and not having anything stable. And 19 years of instability is challenging. And we were certainly not the people who were suffering the most in this world, but it was very challenging to have that much instability, financial instability, and everything that goes on top of that. So having our community step up and want to donate, like whatever they're donating, starting with $1 a month, it all makes a difference. And we totally encourage people to do the same. I know you had a program like that off of Patreon for a while, David.
Yeah, I set it up on my own website and then later set it up on Patreon. And I don't know why I waited so long to do it also on Patreon, because there's a lot of people, as I'm sure you've discovered, who actually just are into Patreon because it's like a really well-designed platform. And why make them work by going to some platform like my own website? I don't know what I was thinking, but how much income I lost from not being on Patreon. I mean, I really hate to think about all that.
Well, I wasn't bringing it up for that, but just to say that you were in the position that we were, which is like make it up. And we always, when we did CDs, we had to essentially create a Patreon, like do a fundraiser kind of campaign in order to raise money to do CDs. So the whole Patreon thing is amazing. And it just started from there, that help that Jeremy from Winborn got us. And then just thinking about, well, what can we do online? And we decided to, certainly we did some of those early Facebook Live concerts, which were fun and were not as unrewarding as I think some people think, because just seeing people's names fly by on the comments and then the hearts and the loves and the laughing faces, like it was very direct, and it has continued to be that way. I never felt like, we were just performing to ourselves on screen. It never felt like that. It was very easy to still feel like I could see those people in a room. I could hear them singing along because we've done it for 19 years, and just trusting that connection.
One of the really cool things about it I discovered is that when you're playing on different groups, Facebook pages or wherever you're performing, you actually get a geographically specific audience of those people. And then it's kind of like a little bit like doing a concert for them, really.
Isn't it funny that people are still regional about those things? Like we do a concert based in Massachusetts, and more Massachusettsites show up. It's adorable. It's kind of like human. I love the human element of that.
Yeah, we didn't know if that would be the case or not, but in fact, some friends of ours, Peter Blood and Annie Patterson, the folks who created Rise Up Singing and Rise Again songbooks, were doing very targeted concerts to get out the vote, and asked us to come along. And we were like, what's this targeted thing? They're going to be anybody from any place is going to show up anyway. And we really saw that, when they did a show for a Pennsylvania audience, a Pennsylvania audience showed up. When they did a show for a Florida audience showed up. It was really, really interesting.
Yeah.
I had not anticipated that at all.
I hadn't either. I had still taking me a while to get my head around, but to some extent, I understand if it's a venue, because the venue, more likely the people that like the page are going to be local people who've heard of the venue. So then when you're playing on the Facebook page of the venue, it's, oddly like playing at the venue.
Yeah. I think that's one way that people are keeping that feeling of connection is really not completely always doing internationally possible things, because they still want to do things that feel like home, like their congregation, because we do a lot of stuff with Unitarian Universalists, or, with whatever is their local theater group that's putting on something. So I think it's kind of a nice thing.
Yeah, I mean, they're maintaining their community connections, but they're also expanding their community connections. I mean, that's the other interesting, side of this, is that we actually have people that are tuning in from around the world and now know about us, which we never really had.
Yeah.
You've always been really good.
Paula
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah, that's right.
But you've always been really good at, touring around the world. And I could
Yes.
never figure out how to do that.
Yeah.
But with the internet, yeah, it definitely,
Yeah.
when everybody's stuck at home and they're not going to live shows anyway, then there's, because I mean, I never got into the live streaming thing until just the past few months, because I was first of all always frustrated by the sound quality, which I've only just recently figured out how to deal with. But also it just seemed like, okay, well, there's already too much free music everywhere, so I don't want to just add more pile of dung to the pile. Just seems like there should be something special about it if it's live. But I know that's something I was wondering about, because it's something we've all been struggling with for so long and in so many different forms. And I think of this industry, the music industry, to the extent that it's an industry, it's been in a state of continual collapse for about 25 years in just a new form of collapse every few years. Just when you think you understand the nature of the collapse, it starts collapsing in a new way. I mean, to me, the really seminal moment was when Spotify started their free tier.
Oh my God.
Because for me, I don't know about if it was the same for you, and I'm curious, but for me, at the early stages of everything being free online, it was like if I was giving it away on purpose by myself, the whole impact was totally different. People didn't pirate it. They still bought CDs and they didn't pirate my music. But the big artists were getting pirated all the time, because I think in the popular imagination, they didn't need the money. Whether that's true or not is another matter. But then it was 2013 when Spotify started their free tier. Suddenly, CD sales completely collapsed for me, and I wonder if that's also, so then, which kind of for some of us, I think for you as well, that you were already thinking in terms of how do we change the way we're doing things in terms of crowdfunding, or in terms of coming up with kind of a stable income, or is that something you didn't really start?
You get so much more credit.
Right.
No.
You only started dealing with that whole question of crowdfunding and Patreon and stuff just last year.
No, I mean, we always crowdfunded for
Yeah.
CDs.
We always
were
Oh,
going
okay.
to produce a CD. We did a crowdfunding, or when we traveled to Palestine, we did a fundraising.
Yeah.
But for the rest of survival, because of course, as I'm always telling people, that it wasn't just about crowdfunding for the CD or making this money for recording the CD. The CD, you lived off of that for the next year, right? You traveled around, you'd sell thousands of them in a given year, and that's a lot of money. That's a lot of profit. Even if you spend $5,000 or $10,000 on a recording, you actually still make money, right? On that, which that whole model just completely fell apart. And then even if you crowdfund for the CD, you're still like, okay, well, where's the food and rent coming from?
Right.
Right.
I mean, the only similar thing that I think we did always think ahead about and always pass on whenever we had these conversations with people about how to do this work is that if you're booked for a gig, you should get paid half up front, because you got to make it till that gig. So you got to guarantee you get paid half up front. You do the gig, you get paid the other half, because there's all that time that we're still doing all the work of coordinating, whatever, buying the airline tickets, promoting, and where we did need money to get through that time to get to the next gig. So that was kind of our way of trying to keep it rolling.
And
plus credit cards, which is not
Credit cards, yeah.
yeah, that's real. But I started doing that actually when I was working solo, because I was really naive. I used to do so many things just sort of on trust and everything. And I showed up to gigs occasionally to find that they were not happening.
Yeah.
There was no crowd, there was no money. Then there I was. So I was like, okay, from here on out, it's 50% of the guarantee down, and there will be a guarantee.
Yeah.
I mean, I just had to get smarter and more professional and more, oriented toward that end of the business, which I'm not particularly good at, but, necessity, whatever. I figured out how to at least figure out some of the the basics of that out of just the need to survive. And to tell you the truth, I mean, when Sam and I first got together and started contemplating performing together, I just said, I'm fried. I don't think I can do this anymore. Because, I've been trying to make my living at this since the 80s. And I just was never very good at the administrative end of it, to be honest. And I just thought, maybe I'm just not cut out to do this sort of thing. And Sam came on and she said, let's just give it a try.
Like,
here we are. And we had written
Right.
songs, and we were writing a lot of material. So she was like, let's just give it a try. And here we are.
Yeah.
That's great to have somebody who's good at that kind of thing, right? Because ultimately, no matter how, I mean, I think you're such an amazing songwriter, but no matter how good you are, you just, you have to be good at marketing yourself, at least to some extent. Otherwise, it doesn't work, right? But in the 80s, you actually were in one of these artists who was, I believe, on independent record labels, which is a thing that maybe people don't realize it used to exist. But were you ever on Flying Fish or any of those?
No, I wasn't. I was
you
on.
never were?
No, I wasn't actually. I approached all of those.
Oh my goodness! And they didn't sign you. None of them.
No, because it was right at that time when the industry and I was mostly in the folk music, more solidly in the folk music world in that time. The industry was moving from one of a whole bunch of small independent labels that were putting out a lot of traditional music and things like that in the folk world. And the whole singer-songwriter thing was just beginning. And, I had people say to me on the phone, we like your songs. We really like your songs a lot. We think you're a really good writer, but we're not sure whether this singer-songwriter thing is going to work or not. And we don't want to take any chances on alienating any of our audience by putting out things that might be controversial. So, I was like right at the, that intersection.
And then I know I've heard you. I mean, you'd be too controversial.
And that third axis is the queerness.
But I think the truth is, the controversial under controversial fell. The fact that you're a lesbian is kind of problematic for some of our audience, because the folk music audience has, like a lot of, different segments of the society, was drifting pretty far right and has continued, I think, to do that.
Yeah. But then at the same time, in the 80s, there was this really fairly large scale phenomenon still of I mean, I don't know if the term, I guess they were still using the term women's music, right? And which seems like such a bizarre dated term, but that's what they were talking about, right? And there were women's music festivals, right? Is that term still used? Women's music?
Yeah.
I mean, now that I'm saying it sounds so strange, but I guess what's the word? So
it is kind of, but we were also, I was at this intersection point with that, because they had started out with a bunch of women playing guitars, and sort of folky-ish stuff, and then moved more into stylistically more into sort of a little bit more of a pop music thing. And they were really moving as fast as they could away from anything that sounded too acoustic or associated them too much with the folk world. And I fell right on the line there. I was way too, men would come to my concerts, and that was really alarming to some of the separatists during that time. I went through a period of time where I had to alternate in different cities that I played in, concerts that were open to all the audience and concerts that were strictly for women. I think a lot of it in my case just had to do with the particular time in our evolution as a culture.
Yeah, and what you were singing about and how you were crossing these bridges, and how that's a fascinating
Yeah,
I mean, because it didn't just work itself out depending on the venue. Like you actually had to think about, okay, is this going to be a both gender or multi-gender or only for women? But like, because the venues, I would imagine, would kind of like sort that out for you. I mean, because like, there'd be a bit, yeah.
It depended. Yeah.
Can we talk about the time
talking about economics and all those things that, stuff that affected all of us? I was talking about race and, they were like, well, we want you to talk about women's stuff. And I was like, aren't I?
Yeah. Right? Aren't these things all related in a really obvious way?
And likewise, I would have the folk music community, be like, well, why do you have to talk about being a lesbian? I'm like, because I think it's important. Because I think
it's part of the human experience.
Problems with this? Wouldn't you agree? Why do you always have to talk about being a lesbian? I'm like, I don't know, but I get this sense that it matters.
I don't know if Paula wants to interject with any questions, please do. But I was wondering about if you could talk about the time that you got played on National Public Radio, because that was a moment. I remember it was like a seminal moment in my life. I was like, whoa, look at that. Pat is on the radio.
That's sweet. I want to hear that story. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, I wrote this song called Swimming to the Other Side. And it's a song that people just picked up and sang really much to my surprise right away. And so
people love it. Everybody loves that song. All the people in the workshop when we learned it, yeah.
Australians were really pissed off about it. They were like, what about the Southern Cross? And I was like, oh, I'm sorry. It happens to be the stars I live under. Yeah.
I didn't even know what the Southern Cross was until I got to Australia. And finally, all those songs made sense. Like, oh my goodness, there's a whole genre about this constellation. I always figured you were talking about something burning in Alabama. And I was like vaguely uncomfortable. And I don't know what this is about, but I'm just going to pretend that somebody else understands. And now it all just sorted out. It was like instantaneous look up one night, like, okay.
We're very provincial over here in this country. Don't worry about it.
Well, because actually that song followed not too long after Keep On Moving Forward was gaining I was getting a little bit of notoriety in Australia because of Judy Small.
She was singing that song.
Recording that song, so then the Australians were like, who is this woman? So anyway, I wrote that song and it got passed around a lot. And then Marika Partridge, who so she was at NPR and in the pretty early days, and she had started an NPR station up in Sitka, Alaska, where she lived. And so she had been like, just one of the names you heard all the time there. Well, she left NPR, but she continued to do some stories, freelance. And she and her family loved to sing, and they were at this family camp in West Virginia. And a couple of sisters, Leela and Ellie Grace, sang the song. They grew up in Missouri. I had no idea how they learned the song, but Leela had a radio show in the college town that they lived in, and so she found some of my music through that. So they had sung the song. Marika and her family just latched onto the song right away. They sang it all the way home. They learned it immediately, and she figured, there must be some big media campaign behind this song, because it seems, she started asking around about it because they really loved it. And everybody she talked to knew the song. So she fully expected that, there was some big, New York PR company promoting it or something. And she found out that it really had just traveled by word of mouth, and that intrigued her. So she decided to do a story for All Things Considered about it. And we had been talking about getting together, and she actually found me when Sandy and I were still living in New York. We had just gotten together, and we were I had plans to move down to Maryland. So I was like, I'm going to be moving. You up for this? And Marika called, and I don't remember who answered the phone because I don't.
I answered.
You
the phone
answered
because
the
I
phone.
didn't know her name, and I was like, I put my hand over there. I was like, Pat, there's someone named Marika Partridge who wants to talk to you, and I didn't know her name.
And I was like, Marika Partridge is calling me? What? Because I had listened a lot to NPR, and I heard her every single time I, tuned in, and I thought, why is Marika Partridge calling me? And then she told me the story about hearing the song, and she said, so, she was sort of like, who are you? And I said, well, and then she said, I live in the DC area, I live in Tacoma Park. And I said, oh, that's really interesting. We're moving down to the next county over to where you are in a couple of weeks. And she was like, you're coming here? Yeah. So we had this plan to meet up, and we were on our way, packing and everything. And September 11th happened.
Mm.
And we were actually in the neighborhood at the time, down there in Maryland. And then, so of course, everything turned to the coming war and all this stuff. And so, I was like, yeah, Marika, I don't know when I'm going to have time. We're going out on tour, and we just took off, and traveled as much as we could. We were singing, we had just written Peace, Salam, Shalom, and doing a lot of demonstrations. And, we were in New York for that first big peace rally and sang there. And so I frankly thought, this interview is never going to happen. And then Marika called up and she said, I want you to come to my house and do a house concert. And then I want to interview you because I really think this is an important story. And I was like, okay. And so we went there and we did a really lovely house concert. And then I think it was the next day.
It was January.
That was
after
January.
that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So then we did the interview. But then the war broke out and everything, war really heated up. And again, I just thought, this is never going to happen, And it took a long time, really, for it didn't air until May.
Mm.
And even then, there were so many things going on in the news. I just thought this is never going to rise to the surface. And they had asked that, I don't know exactly the terms that she used, but something along the lines of, do you know anybody famous? And I was like, well, I know Pete Seeger. And I did a lot of work in the Hudson Valley with Clearwater and stuff. And, he might be willing to be interviewed about it. I don't really know. Like, we don't usually do business stuff. We just kind of stayed away from that stuff mostly. But she called him up and he was willing to give her an interview. And that was, and I think the song just fell at a moment when people really needed some sense of hope and some sense that things were going to get better somehow. New York City was so traumatized, and so many places really around the world were so traumatized by the war, places around the world, Afghanistan, Iraq. So I think the combination of things, just that confluence, made it.
That timing, yeah.
Yeah.
And the song and the simplicity and the message and the story. But also that's so interesting just from a industry standpoint, because I know how many stories on NPR almost happen but don't happen, which is most of them.
Mhm.
And that's the fact that they needed to know, do you know somebody famous, and that they needed to basically have that conversation with Pete Seeger as part of the thing. Otherwise, it might not have flown according to their producers, right?
Yeah.
But then when it did, can you talk about the results of that? Of what the like.
Let me
Just
say
in
for the
terms
first
of your
part
lives
this.
and
Yeah. And let me say for the first part of when it flew, which is that when it finally aired, like we knew it was going to air on that, I think it was a Wednesday, May 22nd in 2002. And
That's
and
funny. I was playing at a protest that day. I remember.
Yeah,
Yeah. There was one in
right.
DC that there was an anti-war protest, I believe.
I don't
No,
know.
that was it was
We
in
were on the
Berlin.
road.
It was in
We were on
Berlin
the
that
road,
day.
but like and
Between
we
New
knew-
York and DC,
and we knew
actually.
what time, it was going to be on All Things Considered. And so we were
Right.
going to be driving on that time, like between, New York and DC. And Pat was like, I was like, you're going to listen to NPR while you're driving and you're going to be on NPR. She's like, I always listen to NPR when I'm driving. I'm like, not when you're on it. Pull over. And so we like stopped at one of those rest stops on the New Jersey Turnpike. So I'm like, you can't be driving while you're like listening to this thing. And just, you gotta listen to it. You gotta,
It's
like,
casual. I'm on NPR every day.
so it was actually pretty sweet. And we heard from so many stories from other people who were like, especially, people who stayed in their cars because they started to hear the story and they had gotten to their destination, but they wanted to listen to it. And especially there was this one woman who wrote and said that she was in a cab and she was, and the story was on, and they got to her destination and she and the cab driver were both like, he turned off the meter. They both wanted to hear the end of the story together. I just
Oh,
thought that was so lovely, so
beautiful.
so the response included really sweet personal emails that we got of like
yeah.
stories of people listening to it. The only place they could get the station was going to be in their car, so if they knew it was going to be on, they drove to hear it. It was amazing.
Yeah, pretty much all 5 of my sisters had to listen to it in the car because they don't have reception in their houses.
Yeah.
Or they didn't then.
Yeah. And
Yeah, we got thousands of emails. We
Thousands. Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
a friend had our friend
Lee,
Lee,
the same
actually.
one who got us hooked up online. I mean, she's just our goddess of that kind of stuff. She
Mhm.
had put up a website for Pat
just maybe
a couple weeks
a
before.
week before. It was just in time.
Great. Just in time. And the website included a merch store, did it?
It did.
Yes.
Where they could buy CDs?
And
Excellent.
people
Yeah.
bought so many CDs. It was amazing. We had to have a work party like with our friends and neighbors who came and just like filling up the living room, be like, people, you put them in the envelope, you weigh them, you stamp them. It was like, it was nutty. And it was also beautiful. Oh, the best thing was when we got to the post office in our town after we arrived home, and like a few days later, and they were like, I don't remember how they knew it, but they were like, are you 244? Are you 244?
Box 244. We were like,
Here. They were like, give us a card.
They had a crate.
we got several of those. We got
Yeah.
letters from people. We got
Yeah.
orders because some people didn't do like the PayPal thing and
Yeah.
stuff, so they did it by mail, and
Oh my gosh.
so it was really amazing.
It was
I mean, from that
amazing.
time on, every year we would take a big basket of stuff to the postal workers
Yeah, because
we
they were
so
just like
appreciated
inundated. It was
how much work they did for us.
and we still love postal workers. And they
Yes.
should get their autonomy back.
Absolutely.
And,
Oh my
Yeah.
Joy
God.
should be out on his
Get
ass
rid
like
of that
all of
guy.
those people. Yeah.
Oh,
Oh.
yeah.
Yeah.
The other really funny thing about there are a number of things that happened. I got another phone call, and I'm going to forget the name of the guy now, who was the head of
Red House Records.
Red House
Mm.
Records, called me up before the thing. He said, I'm getting calls from people at NPR saying that they want to make sure that we have enough stock on hand.
Excellent.
Because I was with Appleseed Recordings.
Oh, good. So they did
months.
Appleseed sign you. That's nice.
Yeah, I was with Appleseed, and my second solo CD, Hands, came out on Appleseed. But that was the only record company experience I had. But they were calling the parent, the head of the parent company, saying, we got to make sure that you have enough, merch
Yeah.
in reserve.
Awesome.
And he said, I've had all kinds of people on this label who had NPR stories, and we thought that was going to be a really big thing, and it wasn't. And so I don't know what to think about this. And I said, well, okay, they just keep telling me that they're not going to release it until they know that there's a certain amount available there. So I'm
Wow.
just,
That's what they were telling you at NPR?
yeah. So
Interesting.
I'm just telling you what they told me, and I have no idea whether this will go or not, And then it did. And it was amazing. We were just shocked, and we were trying to buy a house at the time, and the bank, they never openly laughed, but they we were like two independent songwriters, self-employed people. They were like, yeah, sure. Come back when you get a job, girls. I mean, we really, but we could actually, I took a screenshot of our merch page, and we got our mortgage within a week.
Oh, great.
Well, that was like the start. It was like big start, and that was good.
Right. Because we had just moved to Maryland. We're like, well, we can see that you can make a living in New York, but we don't know that you can make a living in Maryland. And we were like, will this help? So that was amazing. But
So
the
that
other
was a good
thing
launching moment, and
was
yeah.
that we were, what was his name? The artist that just released a CD, and he was on his world tour. I'm
Eminem.
just forget right. Eminem had just released that day. His new CD had dropped,
Mm.
and he was announcing this big world tour and everything. This was the second call that I got from the head of Red House Records, and he said, "You're number one on Amazon." And I was
Oh
like,
my God.
oh, so like in the Little Folk thing, right? Because they didn't sell a whole lot of CDs there, I'm sure, and he was like, no, overall, you are number one on Amazon. And I'm like, what? Are you kidding me? So for 3 days, we were number one in sales on Amazon, and we were outselling, see, I'm still forgetting his name.
Eminem.
Eminem. Don't forget Eminem's name.
That is like a blip in people's history, people, and we should celebrate it, because for 3 days, this out lesbian woman outsold that hater. Right? I don't remember if he's crossed the line past and has sort of become not.
And you know something? Eminem would love that.
Oh, it's fantastic.
So I mean, like amazing things have happened, like that. And I used to joke and say, so it was like an 8-minute segment. So I would used to joke on stage, like, Pat had 8 minutes of fame and she has 7 coming to her, and I still have my complete 15. So it's like that's, that was an incredibly huge moment in 30 years before of that for you, or 20 years before for your career. I mean, you've been doing this for as long as you were, since you were a teenager. And so it's one of those things. And actually, I remember, David, one time in our newsletter, we sort of said something about how we had this, NPR, thing. And it was, and you were like, that was 10 years ago. Like, you're still talking about that. That was it. That was all we had. We had to talk about it.
You said something like, people are going to think that, you've never had anything since. We're like, because we haven't.
Only a songwriter can put that out. So it was so great. It was so perfect. I was like, oh my God, is that what it looks like?
I'm so sorry.
It was fantastic. It gave us an opportunity to really laugh and be like, God, is that what we look like? But it was a victory. It was a people's victory. It was like a victory for someone who's been writing songs that become songs that people sing around the world. And I think it sort of just points to people power, because we've been able to do this and much more stably now because of people power, because we are community supported art now in the best sense of the word. And even in that moment, what that meant was that NPR was sort of delivering something to people that they didn't know that they would respond to, and that they didn't know that they would love, because they weren't gonna find that kind of message every day on commercial radio or even on public radio. And so we really do feel like it's a people's victory. And that's just what we've had to have a lot of blind trust in that. And I think that's why it's sort of come back to us now during pandemic land. Like, people got it. Oh yeah, this music meant something to me, or still means something to me. And there's nothing there now. And so they had to really become it for us. And it's been amazing. So I
Were there
think it's
any particular sort of ripple effects from that you're still kind of noticing now and then? Like, I mean, from people signing up on Patreon or messages that you get from people, is it still kind of like rippling in a noticeable way?
correctly. I think
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
for years and years.
Yeah, we don't hear so
yeah.
directly, but
For years and
now,
years we did. People be
Yeah.
like, "Oh, I heard that song, and it's 5
Yeah.
years ago, and I still remember it." But I don't think
Yeah.
directly so much. You
Not-
think so, Paula?
no, I mean, we don't.
Well, when we learned the song in the workshop,
Right.
there was a lot of people who said that the song had got them through some tough times,
Right.
and
Yeah.
and Gail said that too. And I think this particular song, I think "Swimming to the Other Side," the thing about it is, it has a universal meaning that continues to resonate because it's about hope, and it's there was, like you were saying, there was a kind of time of universal despair amongst all the leftists that you knew. They were all in a really dark place, right?
Mhm.
But we all go through that. Like, I
Mm.
don't think there's any radical out there who doesn't go through that despair at some point or another.
Mhm.
And that song really speaks to getting you through that.
Mhm.
It's and so Gail said because Gail's been a fan of yours for a long time now, about as long as I have, because I discovered you back in the days when you had one downloadable album, and that was Revolutions Per Minute. And I
Excellent.
went, I'm just gonna pay for that and download it, and then get my head around getting CDs from the US later on. And I passed it on to Gail as well, because she just bought an iPod, I think, or something like that, right? She wanted music on it. She said, "Put music on it for me, Paula." And that was one of the very first songs that she started singing along with when she decided to take up singing. It's many years later.
That's
And
so
Great.
and it's because of that. We both of us have been through that.
yeah.
And lots of people in there said that, and I think it's one of those songs. Like, you've had other songs take that story behind the Peace, Salam Shalom. That's really cool.
Yeah.
That was the
And,
next song I wanted to mention, was that that one, how it took off. And
the one
Yeah.
I really like is the one where you became K-pop stars.
Oh,
That was-
We Are One.
I missed that.
yeah, that's
I
right.
want to explain before I'm happy to talk about songs, that Paul
Yep.
is also referring to a weekly workshop, which is
Yep.
one of the things that we started doing in the pandemic land. And
Yeah.
we do it every Sunday. It's called Learn an Emma's Revolution Song. And it
Yes.
was
What got you to start doing that?
well, I mean, I think I needed to think about like, what could we do? And we never succeeded in putting out a songbook with chords and all that kind of stuff. So this was our opportunity.
You haven't yet.
We had not yet, right? And so we just thought that, and we had people, wanting a songbook and stuff like that. So I think that was really where I was thinking about with that one. And I wanted to say about pandemic time that actually workshops work amazingly well and surprisingly well. So that one we've been doing every Sunday at 1 p.m. Pacific for many, many weeks, and just going one by one through songs, whether they're classic songs that we've had for a long time or new songs that we write. And it's really possible both to sing together, even though we can't hear each other, but also to coach on guitar chords and to talk about songwriting a little bit. And we have 2 songwriting sessions that we run every week too. And when we started that first one, we just were like, how is that going to work? Because half of what we do when we do songwriting in a room is that, we get people to sort of start these spontaneous songs, and then they sing them out, and everyone sings them back with harmony. And we felt like, we're not going to be able to do that. And how is it going to work online? And it ends up that we can still do enough of that sort of supportive, we sort of sing it back to them for harmony. But the fact that everyone can turn the sound off on their little box and work on their song while we're talking with somebody else about their song actually ends up to be amazingly useful. So songwriting works online, which we didn't know it would do.
And the fact that there are 2 of us here too,
Yeah.
we can sing their little idea of a melody one of us can sing that melody and the other can sing the harmony. So we get some of that effect. And
Yeah.
it has
And-
worked remarkably well.
How do you decide? And when you're doing the workshops, you're not just doing them for the general public. They're like invitation kind of thing with in Zoom or some format. Like, how do you limit? How do you decide how many people should be in the workshop?
So the Learn Anonymous Revolution is a public thing. That's
Yeah,
on
anybody
Facebook.
can
That's
be
on
there.
Zoom and Facebook Live, and
Yeah.
that could be any number of people because it isn't as specific as songwriting. But our songwriting, we really based it on who was interested, and we have had up to, I think we've had like almost 20 when it was at its biggest, and that was a little too big because it was just hard to fit having attention for everybody's song and going through the circle of people. I think we have something like 13 now in our bigger class, or 14. It's
Are we that big? I don't remember
Something
quite
like that.
How
So,
many.
you know,
Somewhere between 9 and 14.
we wouldn't do
I don't
more
count
than
anymore.
Yeah, we wouldn't do more than something like 15, I think, just for timing. Because we spend it's like a 2-hour session, and the other one is a smaller group and it's an hour-and-a-half session.
One of the things that we asked folks to do is, even if they were experienced songwriters, to do our sort of intro, an intro session with us, just so they could understand how we go about songwriting, so that they would understand the kinds of things that we were asking them to do to help them generate ideas and stuff like that. And
We do an experiential kind of thing.
yeah,
So
it's a very organic, very experiential kind of thing. Neither of us. I mean, Sandy actually has a music education. I don't really have a lot of background in that, and I'm mostly.
But I don't
self-taught.
fucking use it, and don't make me.
Hey, you haven't put the
Yes,
songbook
you
out yet,
do.
right? So you're not using it enough to make a songbook anyway, huh?
Right, exactly.
You
There
know
are
all the
programs that'll
chords.
help you with this.
She does know the chords.
I
Yeah,
do know the chord.
I don't usually.
They do this thing where Pat goes, "Oh, is that the chord I was playing? I didn't know that. It just sounded right."
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
But-
I used to know the names of all my chords, and then I started playing with Dadgad. Now I have no idea what I'm
Oh,
doing.
right.
I just like
Yeah.
something.
And we always say that it doesn't matter because the music came before the words that described the sound. So
Yeah.
people were making music and creating sound and not bothering to put a term to it. So the terminology is all secondary.
I mean, it's helpful. Like in the studio when we were working with side musicians and stuff like that. And I
Mm.
mean, so when we are, it's helpful to have the language and all of that stuff. And I do wish that I knew more of that stuff, but thankfully I actually have Sandy who does speak that
Oh.
language. So that's good.
I was just playing it up for the camera. I just can't resist. I just try to make you laugh. It's part of my job.
It works.
It's an ongoing mission in life to make Pat laugh. Yeah. It's the best laugh. We all like doing it.
Yeah, that's right. I sent Paula the laugh track, by the way. Right, Paula?
Oh, it's so cool.
So back in the days when we needed to do a campaign for a CD, one of the perks that we had for people if they donated a certain level was that they got this laugh track of Pat laughing.
It's like two
like
minutes
2.5
and 14
minutes
seconds or
of
something of
Pat.
me laughing. People would come up to us after a
was
concert and they'd
great.
just be, I could listen to a whole CD of you laughing. And we just,
Great. So that became your perk that you were just letting them have this track occasionally.
Yes, that's right. It's
Wonderful
fabulous.
reward.
Oh my God. You got to be creative in this job, So
Definitely.
Right.
Got to come up with something unique. Yeah.
right.
It's unique.
Yeah. So
One of those things about the Peace Salam Shalom song that always just wildly impressed me and as just such a mystical phenomenon was how that T-shirt just spread around the world. And I would be touring. I've toured in countries where I'm pretty sure you've never been, but that T-shirt is around. Like, somehow people get the
Yep.
T-shirt and they make their own versions of it, and they may or may
That's
not
right.
know that there's a song related to it. It's really it became such a meme, and it was
well, and I have to say that.
That's because of the lefty Mormons. Were they Mormons?
Oh, that
Yeah.
right.
that was later in the game.
Yeah, that was
actually.
quite a bit later,
Yeah.
actually. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, right.
did happen. The lefty
Yeah.
Mormons. Yes.
Well, the idea of putting those three words together is not a new idea, and other people have certainly done that. And even I can't remember anybody's name these days.
Keep eating chocolate.
My blood sugar is low. Other folks have put those.
Donnelly Colt. Is what
Yeah, Donnelly Colt put those words together. In fact, we had a long sort of uncomfortable conversation about that one time. But I really wanted. I just felt like it was really important to have those three words together and to have peace not in English not be the first thing that people saw. I really wanted it to be the Arabic language first, and it also graphically it just worked that way because we did the Arabic in the script, and then the Hebrew in block letters. But we thought that it would be more recognizable that way too. But I just felt like we always put ourselves first in the U.S. We always put English language first, and this just felt like a moment where we need to stop doing that. And it was so interesting to see how strongly the Muslim community in DC responded to that, because we were by then living in the DC area. It was not lost on them that we put their language first, and people were terrorized so soon after all of that happened. The businesses, I mean, I'm sure you remember, but they really, really remember.
Yeah, after 9/11, and people who were, people who wore turbans would have to have an American flag like decal on their windows because they didn't want to get harassed or attacked in their cars.
So I think that had something to do with it, that we did not put ourselves first in that lineup. And there are lots of, we've been lots of places where someone will walk by in the shirt and will be like, nice shirt,
and they don't know
anything about us,
or
know anything about the song or anything.
It's kind of great.
Like some food co-ops would carry it and stuff. Syracuse cultural workers, who are old buddies of ours from a million years ago, they started carrying it, and they've been sort of the merchants of materials for the left for a long, long time. So I think that helped spread the word. But again, it was just kind of a person to person, word of mouth sort of thing.
Yeah.
When you mentioned, I know this is only tangentially related, but when you mentioned the how after 9/11 there was such an atmosphere of terror for Arab people in the U.S. But at the same time, and as soon as 9/11 happened, I was fearing that there would be pogroms against Arabs, and then I was. I guess at least somewhat happily surprised to hear George W. Bush saying Islam is a religion of peace and don't blame all the Muslims. And I mean, there was a lot of other horrible rhetoric coming out of the White House, but at that key moment, I just was, with Trump, I was just imagining what possibly he would have been saying at the time, which would have been very different. I think. So. And there's been so many social movements that we've both been part of for decades now, and they come and go, and the size varies, and the militancy and the politics and the issues, and we all try to write songs about them and interface with them. But I wonder what your particular experiences have been with the movement that's been on the streets since the end of May. Has that been and I'm also curious about the Get the Vote Out campaign that you guys have been quite involved with. I know you mentioned it, but if you maybe any thoughts on how that seemed to go? Obviously, Biden seems to have been just barely elected, so that's it's hope maybe you got a couple hundred of those votes were from your efforts. I don't know. we never know about these things.
We have to hope, that we did, and I think everything that everybody did was absolutely necessary, because as we saw. Biden got more votes, which is great. It's really, really important. And the Electoral College has got to go, because that's the only reason why we were squeaking, or biting our nails for 5 days, is because of the Electoral College, which obviously is a relic, and a dangerous relic, and needs to go. And then we can see also how many people were still willing to vote for a disgusting, cheating, lying, hateful, killing president, or near president, pretend president, And maybe they were voting because they're complete racist, or
Authoritarian.
maybe they were voting because they thought the economy means more than people's lives, which either way, it's a problem. And we have to, reach out and figure out some way to change their minds. And I do feel like everything that all of us did, we needed absolutely every inch of that, which was, in our case, we wrote, gonna vote your asses out. And we did our best to create a video that would be engaging for people and inspiring for people. And we got a lot
And
of
it got
great
lots of hits.
What's that?
It
Didn't
did
get
get
lots of hits. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was
Yeah.
important to us because this is what we do. Like, this was a prime opportunity to do that and to support people in that. And for Black Lives Matter, I mean, we wrote a song that we were able to sing out into the world as much as possible, but we didn't do a whole lot of, we didn't want to be there singing in the streets because that's a super spreading kind of event, even though people are now back to,
Yeah.
super spreading activity of singing
Yeah,
in a
for us
crowd. People are
singing.
now back to it and chanting and whatever. But I'm a person who's, at a risk for this disease. And so I really don't mess around with it. We did do a live demo this past week, which was part of the Protect the Results. So a live in-person, socially distanced, but that was our first one in this time. And so beyond that, we've been doing the work of supporting communities who, so that I'm thinking like particularly of Unitarian Universalist communities. We sing a lot with Unitarian Universalist congregations and concerts and stuff because they are a denomination that really values music and values social justice. And it's a great fit for us. And then we can be there as people who are very well versed about what the being active on the streets feels like and what it can do for people and what edges we need to push for a community that may not be ready to push it to that degree. So we feel like we're doing some of the work so that it isn't all on the people of color in those circles to have to say, no, really defund the police is important. And it's a concept that needs to be, not just sort of like pushed away and be scared of. There are reasons why we're at that language. And the song that we wrote, we just added that into what was possible for people to use and feel inspired by.
Yeah. The other thing that we had already been doing as a practice, just because we felt like we have such a horrible, long, bloody history of institutional racism in this culture that, if there are any ways that we can undermine that system, we're happy to do that. So we've done, whenever possible, invited our friends and loved ones of color to be part of our projects in any way we possibly can.
Yeah,
and
videos and recordings and
help
Reggie Harris.
Reggie
to
Harris,
to help send work their way and bring them into our projects. And so I think putting out content that demonstrates the at least steps toward dismantling that, I think is, and there is no community that's getting this perfectly. Everybody's doing what they can from where they are, and some people, of course, are doing as much as they can to not deal with racism. And I think I think this election had so much to do with fear. I heard from an old classmate, and I've kind of given up on trying to connect with my classmates. I grew up in Northeast Ohio, and though the county that I grew up in is the most populous county, and it's also the most Democratic county, it's still, it has gone so far right in my lifetime. It's just shocking to me. And I heard from a classmate, she, frankly, I was surprised that she bothered to read our newsletters anymore.
Yeah. Why was she on our list?
I was fairly horrified
amazing.
with her views on things.
Yeah.
I wasn't really reading her things at all. And she said to me after our last newsletter,
where we were celebrating.
Where we were like, thank goodness.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank goodness, so that now we can do.
Wasn't my first choice,
continue
but
to
all
do
right,
the work. Create the change. But
these
we needed
people, I
this.
think we can push. Maybe,
Yes.
hopefully.
Somebody said, "Celebrate the loss, mourn the victory."
This, this is not a perfect solution by any stretch. I get it. I really get it. But this is what we have to work with right now. So okay. But she was like, I draw the line at communism, and I was like, where did you?
Where do you get the communist from?
You're kidding me.
I know.
That-
God.
I
Oh
know.
my God.
All the people are like, we're going to be getting socialism with me. We're like, we are? That's great.
I can't wait.
Anything would be better.
Please bring it
I'll
on.
take it.
How was doing your first gig with a sound system for 9 months or something? Was it really cathartic, or were you just worried about spreading COVID, or did you have a good time at the demo?
We had a lovely time. I mean, it was nice to see humans. It was great. And it also just wasn't like, it's not the same as doing a concert either, a demo and such. But we were certainly glad to be there. And the sound was actually fantastic, which was amazing. We know these organizers in San Francisco, and they know us well enough. Like I just said, well, we have to think hard about coming out live. Like, what's the sound situation?
If we're going to be singing through a bullhorn, we're probably not going to make the hour and a half drive.
And you said it was, real. We knew that. We're like, that crew, okay, that's great. So it was actually a really good crew. Good sound.
Excellent.
It's because it's socially distanced and everybody's wearing masks and everything. It's not like the energy that we would usually feel.
And we wore masks
in a live situation, and we sang through masks and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very conscious of the two people who were not masked who were speaking into the mic, and I was like, you're gonna fix that before we right?
It's complicated.
Where's my sanitizer?
Yeah, they had people in the sound crew. They would wipe down the mic
each
between
time
every person,
and have little covers
really,
over it.
Really
and
good,
Mm.
right thing.
Different covers. Yeah, we can rotate the covers. That should do the trick, I imagine. I just bring my own mic because I can't deal with terrible example, but I don't sing through the mask, so I bring my own mic.
It's very real. It's, the threat is very real, and what we're doing is just by definition super spreading activity. So I'm really, really conscious of that.
Yeah,
I don't want to sing in a building for a long time.
No. Can't wait for this vaccine. Do you have anything in particular to add, Paula, or? We've been
I've been able to sit here and not ask a single question because you've all just done it.
We get 3 songwriters in the room, we have
You're such a good storyteller, Pat. I think there's been a really good perspective. I have my own perspective on
oh wow, that's perfect.
Technology.
Wow,
in
what a
industry
place
and
to
all that
freeze.
sort of stuff.
Wait a sec, we lost you for a moment there. Can you?
Yeah, yeah.
You have your own perspective on. It was like the most pregnant pause imaginable. Really.
It was theater. We thought you did it on purpose.
One of the things that has come out of doing the putting together the Song News Network collection for me has been this kind of, part of it is about that whole notion of music, any kind of art being work. People don't realize that, that's part of what interests me is rendering that visible. But also, I think with musicians, what I find interesting is the way that it's always musicians who are kind of in the forefront of mastering a new technology and using it to do creative things and build the community and connect with their community. So, that you've sort of given us a personal perspective on how you've done that in the latest, in the new normal and in the past as well. And so that's been great. I've really enjoyed it. And, I have like a million follow-up questions, but it might have to wait for another episode because we've gone over time.
I have a million follow-up questions too. It's so easy to spend another hour on just the follow-up questions to some of these stories, and get even more geeky about it, But this has been great. Thank you so much, both of you, all of you, for joining us in the discussion.
And I want to say thank you for saying that, Paula, in the way of making visible this work that we often feel is rather invisible. And I imagine that David can have that same feeling of it. Not that it's invisible, but it's intangible. And this is a nice way to hear that reflected back, that part of what you're doing in Song News Network is to make it a little bit more tangible for people. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah. It's a personal obsession of mine as well. But, so, and David and I have been reading this book about this exact topic, and David's going to be interviewing the author. It's called The Death of the Artist.
Right.
And you guys should look it up. You'd really like it. Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
You'll unquestionably
Because he's-
find it cathartic reading.
Oh, good.
Yes,
You'll be
he's
like,
a journalist.
You'll be like, oh my God, there I am again. Yeah.
Yes, that's exactly right. Because he's done a kind of Studs Terkel for the arts industry. So he's gone and interviewed a whole bunch of working musicians and put that all together in this great piece of journalism. It's really
Which
good.
is also full of statistics as well. Yeah.
Does it address this
it's
of the moment?
great work.
I feel like the pandemic made people realize, and does it address the pandemic and that? Because
No, but everything
No,
is
he
just
published
got
it before
everything he
that.
writes about has gotten like 20 times worse since the pandemic. But it was all written before the pandemic. Yeah.
It's interesting because one of the things that we found actually during this
He
pandemic.
told me.
Oh, sorry, you
were
froze again
you were
there.
frozen.
He's in the middle of writing an essay about the
Yeah,
effect of the pandemic on the art.
Good.
We've talked about it. Yeah.
One of the things that we found actually is that, because we're not schlepping everywhere, because we're not, doing all the logistics, doing all the booking in the same way and all of that, we have more time to do music. It feels like we're actually doing more music now than we have in the last 19 years or more, and and while it's still work, it's, we get to get up in the morning, open the door, sit down in front of the computer and do this stuff. Or call our friends, have them record their part, send it into us. Sometimes we send it into an engineer for them to sort of clean up parts. And, it's just a whole different thing. But the response has been really important because what we found is that our audience, more than ever, and we always had a really supportive audience,
Yes.
but more than ever, our audience has come out and just said, what can we do to support you? We realize even more now how much we value what you bring to us. We have people that have been isolating since March, who've been alone since March, that come to our concerts so that they're not alone. That is really such important work. And that we can do that we have the means to do that, and that people so much across the board get the value of that is just incredible.
Yeah, and people are really doing, the people who can support us are then supporting us for the people who need the support, who need the musical support and the community support. So it's amazing. This is the most, concrete for us that it's been and most stable time, which is bizarre. It's sort of it's an indication of how upside down the pandemic is, but for us, we're lucky, and the stability, I'd be happy for it to stay for us, and we can also go back to being humans without the pandemic.
And we can play a concert for 100 people, and then it goes up online, and in the matter of a very short period of time, thousands of people have watched it. So it's
it's so good when you can make it work, and then when you read this book and you hear so many of the reports on NPR and elsewhere about all these artists, you realize that the vast majority of them never got the crowdfunding thing to work and never got it off the ground, and they're working one or two jobs, usually in the service sector, in order which have also dried up. So it's just a fascinating, just total clusterfuck for so many of. And then some of us who manage with the crowdfunding, we're whole different. What's that?
Yeah.
It's a universal crisis rather than a specific.
Right.
Because if you're a musician, you're used to crises, right? You have them on an individual basis all the time. Yeah, and same if you're in the industry at all. But this one, it happened to everybody all at once.
Yes,
and not just the musicians, but it happened to all of the tech people.
Yeah.
All of those, there's a huge crowd of people in Australia who make their living by working at music festivals.
Yeah.
You know, setting up the sound or the marquees or the whatever. And that work just disappeared.
That's
All
right.
the festivals got cancelled. You know, it was across the whole industry all at once in many countries, you know.
Globally, that's the global thing. Is I always
Yeah.
thought, you mentioned,
And
I
all the
tour a
art.
lot in other countries, and that I always thought, well, at least if the economy collapses in the U.S. or something, or I have no more fans in the U.S., at least there's like England and Denmark, and
Europe. Yeah.
well, there goes the whole world all at once. It was really quite
Oh my
something.
God.
I diversified my assets, and it still didn't help.
Yeah. Well, I
Yeah,
have to
that's
say that
right.
while we have been talking to you about how supported we are, we know we're very unique, partly because we can do what we do
Right.
just with the two of us, and
Yeah.
not a musician. We know lots of people who are side musicians, and
Yeah.
that's not the same story for them. So we're very aware of
that's
it,
right.
and also just dancers and
Yep.
symphony players, and
Mhm.
on and on.
Yeah.
So we're very aware that we are kind of lucky, and I think. Part of it, though, I do think, and I know we're doing follow-up questions into our next
Alrighty,
segment, but
Yeah.
I do think that it makes a difference that we were always grassroots musicians and very connected to our audience directly. We stayed in their
Yeah.
houses when we traveled.
Yeah.
We
Mhm.
had dinner with them before the show because
Mhm.
they cooked it and brought it to the church where we were playing. So
Yeah.
I think that
We know their kids. We've watched their
yeah,
kids grow up.
right.
You know?
Yeah.
And so I think that that's
David's the same.
yeah, that's partly why we are able to keep going, because we can still have that kind of direct connection. Whereas if you have a record label in between you and your audience, or you have a manager between you and your audience, or whatever it is, that we did not have anybody between us and our audience, so they still were with us.
And that's a lot of musicians have been using this time to make that direct connection with their audience again, because as you said, it's you working in the business, but you're also working on the business. Your real work is providing songs and making music, but you get very little time to do that if you're a touring musician.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of musicians have had this experience, and
Yeah.
and then so they don't want to connect through their management anymore, right? And they've found other ways to sort of bypass that, even if they're well enough off to be living off the royalties. They've gone, what am I going to do with myself?
Right.
Especially since the management company folded a few years ago anyway, right?
Yeah,
When the
that's
management
right.
company folds anyway, and then you have to start managing yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When the people that used
But-
to distribute your CDs stop distributing anybody's CDs because there's not enough money to be made in it, you're doing it yourself again.
And we used to
Yeah.
complain we had to
From
wear
my
all the
experience.
hats, but I guess we were lucky that we had to wear all the hats all along, because we're still wearing them, and it's
Right.
it's possible, but we didn't have to do that learning curve. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all right.
I think it does make a difference to folks that have had to, to just pull together whatever tiny resources they had and
Mhm.
learn to make everything from the ground up. It means that we have and those
We've all participated in that
are
because
beyond-
we want you to be able to do it again.
Yeah, but those skills even go beyond music. Can we make our own food? Can we grow our own food? Can we do all these things that we may well have to do for some amount of time here? Can we build our own things that need to be built? Those having and retaining those kinds of skills are I think really crucial.
Can we
as
run
we go
our
forward.
own tech, or do we need tech support like Paula?
No, we will.
I think the
always
answer is
need-
you can, but it's better to have.
It's-
Yeah, we will
Definitely.
always need the community. That's the
Yes.
thing. And those
Yes.
of us, I think, who are clear about that and who create those networks, I think are the ones that will always get through somehow.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
think that's true in poor neighborhoods all around the world.
Mm.
Oh man, right? Absolutely. And actually, I've never seen so much mutual aid than in a neighborhood I lived in, where most of the people were on welfare.
Yeah,
For
Right.
sure.
because it's interdependence. That's
Right.
how
Yeah.
to survive.
Right.
Yep.
Wow.
So
Well,
great.
thank you guys so much. This has been such a pleasure. Let's plan a next discussion sometime down the road if
Love
you're up
that.
for it.
Definitely. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Take care so much, y'all.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
me too.
Love you
Much
both.
love.
I'll see you next Sunday.
Okay,
Right
good.
on.
Bye.
Good. Bye. And this has been an episode of Song News Network Presents, and you can find it if you look for on the Facebook page of Popular Resistance and various other places, and in audio form if you look for This Week with David Rovics, wherever you get your podcasts. Bye for now.